we get awestruck by beauty. And so to be looking for beauty and recognize it when we see it. And there's so many versions of beauty, so many levels of beauty. There's beauty in a baby's birth, in a baby's laugh. There's beauty even in old people, in their elegance and their stories. And of course, there's beauty all along our lives.
Welcome to the next episode of the Life in Transition podcast. In this episode, I have the distinct honor of interviewing Father Matthew Fox, 85 years old, author of 44 books translated to 80 languages, was fired by the Pope after 34 years as a Dominican, has many of his books and works are focused on helping men heal and grow and find healthy masculinity. Wonderful conversation, meaningful to me, helped me a lot, and I think will help you a lot too. If you're in transition, you are a man or in a relationship with one of any kind, and then you're going to want to hear this and take the tools and the wisdom he has to heart. What an honor and a blessing to spend this time with him. Please enjoy. Please share with someone that you know that could benefit from his message. Thank you. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I am really honored and excited today to have with us Matthew Fox. And Matthew is a spiritual theologian. He's authored 44 books that have been translated into more than 80 languages, including The Hidden Spirituality of Men, 10 Metaphors to Awaken the Sacred Masculine. Also, The Reinvention of Work and Creativity, Where the Divine and Human Meet. He was a Dominican father for 34 years before being fired by the Pope and is now working with men to live deeper, more meaningful lives, and is currently an Episcopal priest. Matthew, I'm so excited to have you here on the Life in Transition podcast. Your work is where I'm trying to come into and help men along the same path, and I feel really lucky to be able to have this conversation with you today.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too, Art, and I really praise you and congratulate you for what you're doing. I think just raising the whole question of how men can come into their own more fully and more healthily is so important today. It has everything to do with the survival of our species, I think, and of course with the advancement of women in our lives too, and of course education, the way we treat our young and teach them the stories that matter, etc. There's such a, what should I say, a banquet of ugliness these days in the news from men who are not acting healthily, that we've got to combat that with some positive energy and ideas. And I congratulate you for having a whole program dedicated to that.
Thank you very much. It's really important. It's something, I've struggled with my whole life. I'm still in the process of becoming, as we all are. And I've seen so many of my friends too, with either I'll say a false masculinity or not masculinity, or even people that have taken their own lives because they've got to such a place of despair by the confusion in society today and feeling like they don't have anyone to talk to.
Yeah, that all that is so true. Or the suicides too. And what is it? Men commit suicide 4 times more than women do. And of course, gay men have, what should I say, multiplied.
Yeah, even fewer outlets and feel more isolated.
Exactly. Or negative messages coming to them from all sides. So, yeah, men really do need some attention these days. And I'm glad that you're helping to give it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think it is very much compounded for gay men because I feel like there's, in this false masculine narrative, part of it is about being anti-gay men in the false masculine narrative. And that's something
being anti-women in the false masculine version of things, where control is God and idolatrous, really. And it's sad because men's souls are eager to enjoy life and to celebrate and to love, and with many expressions, as women are. But we can wrap ourselves up in like a pretzel with false ideologies and fears that really aren't necessary, and therefore the yearning to control others, beginning with controlling ourselves. The whole thing can be a mess. So let's try to do a little unraveling today.
Yeah, let's jump in there because I'm curious when you talk about, obviously, controlling others is a lost cause. And you said also trying to control ourselves. I think about, continuing to unfold and continuing to grow closer to God, more fuller expression of myself, continuing to let myself be, work on being in the second half of life instead of just doing. When you're talking about control, that it sounded like you were saying it's negative to try to control ourselves. What would you put instead of that? What should we be working toward if we want to show up as really healthy men in our society, in our neighborhoods, in our families?
Well, I think we should be working toward celebrating our existence and what the mystics call the via positiva. And I think science can help so much, say, with like Webb telescope. Here we are picking up these pictures from 13 billion years ago of how the universe began. And what a miracle it is that we're here.
Yeah, at all.
On this tiny planet, this so special planet, in this huge universe of 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. I mean, it's just enough to take the top of your head off. And that's awe and wonder, and that's how you begin. And out of that comes gratitude and reverence, which is a deep caring. Rabbi Heschel used to talk about radical amazement. Well, I think science is just putting radical amazement, into our computers every day.
Right.
And all this should stir us up and realize, wow, our species, which is literally on the brink, and we're bringing down other species with us by the hundreds of millions. Our species has this amazing intelligence and capacity to discover our origins and how special it is that we're here. And to realize, look, so far I think we've counted 14 other hominid species, and what they all have in common is that they're all extinct. We're the only ones here, we're the last ones standing. Wow, shouldn't this, light a fire under us to put learning how to take care of ourselves in the deepest sense ahead of killing each other ever more efficiently, et cetera, et cetera. These just the budgets of war that are just out of control all over the world, really. It just tells us that we're a very dangerous species, dangerous first of all to ourselves.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
let's shake it
Yeah,
up.
we're the most lethal to ourselves by far.
We are the most lethal species beginning toward ourselves, but then others too. We're pretty good at projecting our anger and violence on other species as well. So
I had a
it's a
thought
great moment
experiment.
for us to come alive and to take that next step in our evolution, which is,
Great.
as you say, has to be something like a spiritual step. That is to say, we have to go deeper than just dealing with our reptilian brain of I win and you lose.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
that's what's prevailing in our world today. But we have to bring forward that mammal brain, which is half as old as the reptilian brain. But the mammal brain cares. It has kinship, family, all that. And it honors the mother, it honors the feminine dimension in all of us, including in them.
Absolutely. You started by saying that there's this, that to be in awe and wonder
Yeah.
about this miracle. Like, I love that quote. I don't remember who says it, but that the world is full of miracles just waiting for us to pay close enough attention.
Who said that?
I don't remember who said it, but it's not me. I don't want to take credit for it, but I heard it 25 years
But
ago.
Rilke says existence is a miracle. And I think that's a great 3-word summary.
Yeah. And how to help, like, how do we move to awe and wonder? How do we recognize the miracle? I mean, I was listening to a guy speak the other day, and he had this thought experiment, just said, imagine you're getting chased by a tiger and it's really about to eat you and you're totally in fear. And he said, and then just have this one thought. I wonder how much the tiger weighs. And as soon as I have that thought in my imagination, the fear is gone, because he said you can't have wonder and fear at the same time.
Then you can't have love and fear at the same time.
Exactly. Or gratitude, right? If we use the awe and
Right.
wonder to move to gratitude. But how, if this is a starting point, if this is an entry point to moving toward our best self, is to be in awe and wonder of even being here 13.8 billion or 13.9 billion years later now, as we move along. What would you recommend for daily practice, a momently practice as I look out the window here, to put ourselves in more of a state of awe and wonder and gratitude instead of fear and anger and I win, you lose thinking that has been prevalent on this planet for a long time?
Well, of course, going into nature, and whether it's camping or hiking or just picnicking, just being in nature and taking account of what's there, not taking it for granted, but I'm just picking up one leaf. I'm meditating on. This is spending time with one leaf, with its shape, with its beauty, with its history. It's like Thich Nhat Hanh says, one piece of bread, when you meditate on it, it includes the clouds, the rain, the sun, the sunshine. Well, 13.8 billion years. Everything we encounter has that history that we have, and it has a story to tell. And so we want to listen to the stories that the trees want to tell us, and the animals. And of course, our relationship with animals, it may be horses or dogs or cats or birds, they all have something to tell us. The great mystic like Meister Eckhart says, that every creature is speaking God to us in their own way. But we have to listen. I remember meeting a Native American several years ago. He said, trees talk to each other, but you have to listen to hear them talk. He said, and white people so seldom listen. So
Right.
the practice of listening, and another word for listening, I think, is contemplation, but is just being able to receive what's coming our way. And that's, again, I go back to today's science, these pictures that are coming from Webb telescope, is you listen to them, you kind of enter into them because they're telling us our story as well as theirs. And there's such beauty in what they're how they're presenting themselves. That too, to be, we get awestruck by beauty. And so to be looking for beauty and recognize it when we see it. And there's so many versions of beauty, so many levels of beauty. There's beauty in a baby's birth, and in a baby's laugh. There's beauty even in old people, in their
Really?
elegance and their stories. And of course, there's beauty all along our lives. So I think it's one reason, frankly, that people like to watch sports is that there's elegance and there's beauty. Like today, this is Olympic times.
We're
So
here in the Olympics, seeing some of the
there you
skating
go.
over there. Wow.
And excellence. And
Mhm.
we admire that. Who doesn't admire excellence in sports or in music or dancing or anything else? But we're surrounded by beauty. The Navajo have this beautiful prayer they like to say in a circle dance, walking behind the person in front of you. I walk with beauty before me. I walk with beauty behind me. I walk with beauty above me. I walk with beauty below me. I walk with beauty all around me. And then toward the center of the circle, bowing with your hands open. Your world is so beautiful, oh God. And for the Navajo spirituality is all built around beauty. So many of their prayers are about beauty. So waking up to beauty and not taking it for granted. Don't wait till our last breath on our deathbed to be grateful for beauty.
Right. So that's a great place to step into awe and wonder, is noticing beauty. And a great place to start with that is nature. You can see it in a lot of places, of course, but I know for me, it's a lot easier in nature. I can't help but feel inspired and feel in awe and wonder. And when I was this last year in 2025, it was a very tough year for me emotionally. I just felt down a lot. And what started my coming out of it, I had a 1-2 punch, but I went to the Appalachian Trail in Maine and hiked the 100-mile wilderness by myself.
Well, that
And
did it.
there was times, like, I felt like it was just me and nature and God, and every once in a while, a few people. But there were times, like, where I'd see these moss beds that were, like, 6 or 8 inches of moss, and I would just gently, take off my shoes, take off my shirt, my pack, and just lay on this moss. And it was
Nice.
unbelievably, spiritual, sensual experience.
Yeah.
To be
There you go.
connected with the ground, be connected with the plants
Yeah.
there by myself,
What a beautiful story. What a beautiful story.
Yeah, coming back from that, I felt so much more in touch with God, so much more in touch with awe and wonder, and so much less, it sounds maybe too harsh, but I'll say self-pity right now that I was feeling before I went. And then, or shortly after that, I went to an Illumin organization in Richard Rohr's camp in New Mexico, and I had additional connection with men and with nature there. And it really felt very different. So that was in 1 month time. I did both of those.
The conversion experience.
Yes. Yeah, but I continually, the days that I start with a jog outside on the beach or seeing the sunrise over the mountains are days that go much better. It sets my mind in this awe and wonder mode and appreciation and gratitude than other days.
Bill Everson, the poet, a California poet, used to say most people experience God in nature or experience God not at all. And I do think that's true. And that's why I talk about a creation-centered spirituality. That nature today is, we're learning so much about it, of course, and beginning with evolution centuries ago, but it's exploding. I didn't get our mitts. And at just the time, we have a new creation story from science, a cosmogenesis. And with that, we can reset our existence. In my book on latent spirituality of man, where I'm talking about 10 archetypes of healthy manliness, the first is Father Scott. And I have a passage in there, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to
No,
share
please.
from another writer, not myself. It's
Yeah.
from Scott Russell Sanders in his book, Hunting for Hope, A Father's Journeys. And it's interesting how this book was born. He took his 17-year-old son out on a camping trip. Either going to spend several days together alone in the woods and everything you and I are talking about.
Right.
And he thought it would just be a great bonding thing. And instead, there's a big blow up because his son, Scott Sanders, had been writing a lot about the suffering of Mother Earth today, and all the suffering of global warming and all that. And his son just went kind of crazy on him and said, "Dad, don't you have any hope in you at all? I don't want to talk to you anymore. You depress me." So his father, after this completely failed camping trip, his father decided to take a year off. Like he took 2 years off, and to answer that one question, where is their hope? Where is my hope? And he can write so well. Let me share with you what he said. He said, "I still hanker for the original world, the one that makes us, rather than the one we make. I hunger for contact with the shaping power that curves the comet's path and fills the owl's throat with song and fashions every flake of snow and carpets the hills with green. It is a prodigal, awful, magnificent power, forever casting new forms into existence, then tearing them apart and starting over." And he says, "It's here that I found my faith. Faith in what? Our capacity for decent and loving work, in the healing energy of wildness, in the holiness of creation." And then he says, "If the universe exists at all, that it obeys laws, that those laws have brought forth galaxies and stars and planets, and on one planet at least, life, and out of life, consciousness, and out of consciousness, these words, this breath, is a chain of wonders. I dangle from that chain and hold on tight." I just use these just as a splendid and delicious naming of why cosmology, Father Sky, is important. Our connection to the whole. And it's really what you talked about, lying down in the moss. And not to take it for granted. I mean, but there's a very simple thing we can do. And of course, this is from the spiritual traditions of the world. And that is just not taking our breath for granted, so to sit and to realize we're breathing, because obviously we do it automatically and you can't stop your life to notice you're breathing all the time, but to not take a breath for granted. Because, if you've ever been there when a baby is born and takes his first breath, or a person dies and takes their last breath, both are what? Moments of reverence and ecstasy and awe, aren't they? And so in between, why take all of the other breaths for granted? So that's what meditation is essentially about, is learning not to take for granted. So to pay attention to that breath and the breathing, the inhaling, the exhaling. And it's taken on the Hansa, you can inhale joy and exhale troubles, as you like, etc. You can put words on that inhaling and exhaling. But this is something we always have with us. You can do it on a subway. You can do it while you're driving. And it's tiny compared to making a 100-mile walk in the woods alone and lying down in the moss, but they're really both the same thing. That it's a shakeup of our everyday problem-solving mentality, which is necessary to survive, to go to that other place. And of course, it's no coincidence that in so many languages around the world, the word breath is the same as the word for spirit. There's no division between material and spiritual. No, it's one thing that's going on. Life is life, and it's sacred everywhere. So,
And I think
those are
there
practices.
is to, if we are present with it, right? I love Eckhart Tolle's writings about that as well. But if we are present with it, like whether I'm noticing the moss and really being present with that, or I'm with it really being present with my breath, what I notice for myself, like when I was meditating this morning, there's just by the simple act of paying attention to my breath, just for 12 minutes. And I've just woken up. I haven't even started the day yet. I haven't even gotten stressed out yet. And yet I feel a sense of release and peace just in those 12 minutes. Most of the time, I even have tears that come from it's interesting also, from the outsides of my eyes when I'm meditating, not from the insides, but come with saddest tears. But it's almost always, I feel the sense just by 10 or 15 minutes of paying attention to my breath and feeling present, like really being present. It's not even, I wouldn't even say it's strong enough to be in awe, but it's strong enough to be present, like to be really present and notice what's actually going on just for a few minutes. And it changes my mindset, even if it was already pretty relaxed from just waking up. And I was talking with Stacy Peralta recently, and he said, my meditation time is the greatest gift I give to the planet.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, it took me a minute to digest that. But I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, because if I take the time to become aware, to tap into my higher self, then how I interact with everything else, the decisions I make, the people I talk with, it's going to be a
You're
much
giving your
result.
better self to the world
Right, exactly.
because you've taken care of your inner work there. And that's so beautiful. And I liked how you distinguished between the outer tears and the inner tears. Tears of beauty too. It seems to me they're also like those outer tears. But all the tears are so important, including the grieving tears, of course.
Yes.
And that's another thing that men especially, but of course all of us, women too, have to deal with today, because I feel that there are only two kinds of people in the world today: those who know they're grieving and those who don't know they're grieving, because we're all grieving. We all know at some level of our being, including children, of course, that, the earth is in trouble, and humanity's in trouble, and other species are in trouble. And it's not enough to sit on it or to feed lies to ourselves or to listen to politicians who are feeding lies that there's nothing serious going on. It's a consensus among every notable scientist. And so rather than freeze or just get depressed, we have to have ways to get that grief out. And I do a lot of that with rituals where I have people get down on all fours, which is really sixes if you count. It's your feet, your knee, and your hands. That's six. And then you add a seventh. That's your forehead. So to put your forehead down the floor too, like what Muslims do when they pray. And then you've created an echo chamber there. And then you let the sound out from your third chakra, your gut, because that's where we carry anger and where we carry grief. And anger is the first level of grief. I think one reason there's so much anger in the world today, frankly, is that we're grieving and we don't have enough practices to do it where we can do it together. And we let out that anger, the first level of grief. And when you do this in a group, I instruct people, listen first to yourself, and then keep your sound going, that from the third chakra, whatever sound wants to come out. Often it's wailing and even screaming, but then start listening to your neighbors. It is so powerful to realize, hey, we're all grieving. We're all going through this wild stuff, and that's filled with anger. But then once you let the anger out, then you can go to the next level of grief, which is sadness. And it's in sorrow. That's gentler. And then the third level is letting go, emptying. And so I think that's very important too. It's not just that we pay attention to the awe and the wonder and that we've been talking about, but also the grief and which, as I say, anger is embedded in too. We need practices that allow that to happen.
When I reflect on this last year for myself, I didn't feel a lot of anger, some, but not much. But I have felt a lot of anger in the previous decades. But I had so much sadness, but I felt like I had to have a reason to have it. And so I just blocked it. I just held it at bay. My life is fine. It's perfect. Well, there's nothing to be sad about. So I sort of didn't give myself permission to feel it. In my mind, what it seemed like that created for me is then it creates like depression, like stuck sadness becomes depression, where it's like really heavy until eventually where it just has to come out even for no reason. And luckily I'm in community and I have men's groups and people to call and say, there's probably this summer I probably called 5 or 10 friends, 6 or 7 in the morning. Like I'm just crying and I don't know why. And I feel like I want to talk to somebody about it. But coming out the backside of that with the Appalachian Trail, and not like it's a backside because the process will continue to go, but a big process of it being on the Appalachian Trail and then being at this workshop called The Tears of Things with Richard Rohr,
Oh yeah.
where it talks about that anger becoming sadness, which is the only way, if you experience that sadness, express that sadness, is the only way to come to compassion. That what you call letting go, right? So I think I'm a work in progress, like we all are, but I feel I have more days of letting go and peace now than I do of tough sadness, which I had last year.
Interesting.
But it was by letting myself experience that and by getting into nature even more. And I'm in nature a lot. I run outdoors and in the woods almost every morning or on the beach. Um, but it's, I think helping ourselves heal and grow and become at peace as men, and then also in community with other men, to me is the first step for us to make a difference in anything else, because otherwise we interact in a way that's not helpful.
I like the emphasis you put too on friendship and community, because many men today, especially young men, are saying they feel isolated and alone. And of course, I think a lot of that is the hours that people spend on the internet and social media and so forth, that a screen does not do it for us. As human beings, we need much more than technology. But to make friendship a value, and friendship takes time, and it's risky, as to say, you can get wounded, etc., and hurt. But to find friends, both male and female friends, and as you said, mentors, that's a very great gift, to be mentors to the younger generation. And what I like to call intergenerational wisdom, where the old and the young get together. I think it's very clear that there's a special relation between the, if you will, the grandparental generation and the grandchildren generation.
Yeah.
The parents in the middle are having to not only raise a family, but make a living and run the culture for the most part too. So the older ones, the elders, and that whole thing about the role of eldership, it's not honored in our culture. We tend to park old people in camp by themselves, retirement homes, and call them in on a holiday or something. But that quest for elders, I wrote a book a few years ago with Adam Bucko called Occupy Spirituality. And we interviewed a lot of young adults for it, because it's a book for young adults, really. And one of the questions we asked was, what's the role of elders in your life? And something like 95% said, I'm looking for elders that can't find them. And that was just so interesting, because I think previous generations were not looking for elders, but that generation was. And then they also added, when we did find them, they talked too much. So that's a good lesson for elders, that your first job is to listen. What young people are going through today is really unparalleled.
Yeah, we
Face it,
imagine. Yeah.
all the realities of so little is working. Education and politics and religion and all of it is in collapse. Well, you can just mope over that, or you can say, wow, what a great time to be alive. It's such a time for creativity, such a time for us to get together and reinvent things.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I was at a conference a few years ago when Jordan Acey was still alive. And it was with scientists and others about the climate change. And there were two scientists who spoke, and then I was asked to speak about the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si, which was a great piece of work on the environment. And we finished, had our dialogue, and then Joanna showed up. She was 93, and it was Q&A time. She picked a microphone, and she said, isn't it amazing to be alive at this time? She said, she was 93, and she just got all excited about how special it is to be called to be alive at this time, when so much has to be, reinvented and rediscovered in terms of our deeper selves. It was a beautiful moment to hear that from a 93-year-old with the microphone in her hand. Yeah.
But what a great perspective. What a great perspective, because it is easy to get depressed and feel self-pity and then not take action. Or you can say, okay, this is an opportunity now to, like, everybody, it's got everybody's attention, whether it's good attention or bad attention, it's got everybody's attention. And now we can see, can we create something wonderful together that has a possibility to make it another 1,000 or 2,000 years,
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting you've brought up that term self-pity several times, and I think that's an important term for men to think about, because I think men do tend to fall into that trap a lot. I think it has to do with our cutting ourselves off from our own powers of compassion and recognizing the capacity of compassion in others too. That when we're isolated, then it's the self, the ego with a small s. The ego is, feeling sorry for itself.
Right.
And so I think that's an avenue into kind of shaking us up. That really self-pity is not a very masculine energy in the good health of the world. A healthy man, and one of the archetypes that I treat is that of the spiritual warrior. That there's that warrior energy that's in all of us, and it's in women too. We need it to survive. Our earliest ancestors certainly had it,
Absolutely. Oh,
sure,
be here.
sharing the land with tigers and woolly mammoths and all the rest. I mean, and there's no time to sit around and feel sorry for yourselves. You gotta band together, and get your energy up, and that's what a lot of ritual is meant for, to to get us energized, get all our chakras alive, and all our atoms and molecules ready to go for it. But self-pity is really is sad, really, just to think about it, that people are so isolated that we're feeling sorry for ourselves instead of acting to renew ourselves. But it's a reality, and it's excellent that you name it. Then, therefore, we can talk about it, think about it, and get advice about it. Realize
Yeah.
that compassion is one thing, but self-pity is another.
No, absolutely. But I feel like, if you look at, we talked a little bit earlier about suicide, but all deaths of despair are in some way or some manifestation of self pity in one way or another, right? I can't figure it out. So I need this substance to make it okay, to stop the pain or stop, numb it out, or all the way to taking my own life. So I think, and that also comes out of isolation, right? So I know
Isolation.
I'm in 12 step, and we talk about the opposite of addiction is connection. It's not sobriety, it's connection. Right. And that's where it starts from, because anytime that, no matter what's going on with you, if you have a good, strong connection, you can share with somebody else. And that's the beginning of a different perspective. That's the beginning of taking action instead of feeling in self pity.
And there's that bonding, that friendship,
As
in 12 step, that is such a big part of the healing process and of grace. You're receiving it from others, and then you learn that you're capable of the same, of giving it also.
yeah, to yourself and to others. Right. That's one of
Exactly.
the most
Yeah.
difficult things
My
we can
instructor
reach
says,
to ourselves.
yeah, Master has this great line. He says, compassion begins at home with one's own body, one's own soul. I think that really is important. You just said something like that there. That's where it came to mind. But that compassion is not just about giving out. It's about caring for yourself so that you're healthy enough to be able to give out.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, that's Jesus' number one command, right? Love your neighbor, or in terms of what's
As
translation,
yourself.
love your enemy, but how? As yourself. So you have to love yourself
Exactly.
first. You have to tap into God to be able to get the love of God, to love yourself, and there from there be able to love others as you love yourself. I
Exactly.
I wonder, Matthew, for you, where was the tipping point? Where was the transition for you to really start focusing on men's work and healthy masculinity, and trying to make this impact that you are? Was that already as a very young man, or was it somewhere along the way? What was the tipping point for you where this became your mission?
Well, looking around, eh, and noticing that men were pretty messed up.
Yeah.
The men who were running things, as you alluded to my biography and how the Pope expelled me from the order after 34 years. But that particular Pope, really there were two of them back to back. What can I say? They were not men that I admired.
Right.
And yet they had risen so high in the organization. And one has to ask why. Why do our organizations put in charge people who are so lacking deepest human virtues and character,
And yeah.
who resort to lying and controlling others? The same Pope who expelled me he silenced 108 other theologians. I was wondering, why was he so afraid of thinkers? I was like, firing theologians in a church is like General Motors firing all the engineers. You don't get real far after that, because you need thinkers to translate things as culture evolves, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And it's just shooting yourself in the foot. So why this self-hatred? And, Eric Fromm says that you need a lot of study about fascism, being a Jew coming out of a Holocaust experience, that he says fascism comes from an intense self-hatred. Then you project that onto others, and it makes a system of control, control, control. And it's not about learning. It's not about what you're talking about healing each other, listening to each other's stories. It's just about obedience and control. And so I felt that happening in our culture back at the turn of the century, I guess, and it was gaining steam. And when you look at American situation today, I mean, if you just look at the Supreme Court and know how it was designed, we now know that Leonardo Leo is the lawyer who put the six conservatives we have on the court, and he himself is linked with Opus Dei, a very far right-wing fascist movement in the Catholic Church.
Right.
So I studied, Opus Dei. I studied these movements that were gaining so much traction in the church. So, of course, I had questions about why do men settle for this,
Right.
because I had met wonderful men in my life, and I've had wonderful mentors, etc. But it just seemed that this version of masculinity was gaining steam, and it wasn't making men happy. It wasn't making anyone happy. It's like ice. Who's happy about it? I don't think the ice people themselves could, unless they're really sadistic, can be particularly happy with the way they're being received on the one hand, but certainly the people in Minneapolis aren't happy. So what is all this spreading of unhappiness? Is it necessary? And I was looking at the men's movement, and of course I knew Robert Bly before he got in the men's movement. He had come and visit my school when he was working with Kabir, the Eastern mystic, and we had a lot of fun together in his mystical phase, you might say. And then I respected what he was doing in the men's movement, but I also had some differences too. I felt he was a little overly aggressive, like Iron John. Just the name just sounds a little scary.
Iron John.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it, for some people who got on board, was there was a backlash against the women's movement, and I was not in favor of that. I thought healthy men welcome the liberation of women in our lives as well as ourselves. I just felt there was another way to treat it, and draw in some other archetypes. Like I hadn't heard anyone deal with the archetype of Father Sky and the new cosmology. And I was dealing with scientists for years, Brian Swim and Thomas Berry and others, about the new cosmology. I just felt how big a story that is, and how wonderful a story. Talk about awe and wonder and radical amazement. So I felt there had to be room for that. And then the green man is my second archetype. And that's important, that because I lived in Europe for 3 years where I did my doctoral studies, and you see these green men all over the churches and stuff. And I was very, allured by it. And what is this, And then I learned more about it. It's just marvelous archetype of men getting in touch with nature and with generativity. It tells a lot of stories really about how men how men give birth to so many of these paintings and sculptures even were of a beard that goes all around the head like a wreath, and in it dwell birds and grapes, and just it's our relationship to the vegetative world. And it's an affirmation of our capacity for creativity. And that's a big part of being a human being, and a healthy man, and a happy man, that our creativity and receiving the creativity from others is part of the joy of life, and is how we get rid of a lot of our anger too, and therefore our grief. You can invest it in sports and in art and in play. All that, cleanses the soul, and anger takes a second place instead of a first place.
So in your book, The Reinvention of Work and Creativity, where the divine and human meet, take us through that. I think of, I often quote Julia Cameron, where she talks about our creativity is God's gift to us and what we do with it is our gift to God. But I've never heard that so strongly before. Like this is where, and I look for this intersection a lot. Like where do I meet God? Like where do we overlap? Where do we intersect? How do I get that communication? But
Mhm.
you've talked a lot about creativity and the importance of creativity, which I recognize. But this idea about this is where we meet God. Take us through that, where the divine and man meet, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it's a theology of the Holy Spirit, to use a Christian terminology. Although Holy Spirit is a Jewish idea too,
Right.
um, because of the Spirit is what brings creativity. Also, angels are involved, because angels, Aquinas says, angels learn only by intuition, and so whenever you're on that highway of intuition, you will encounter angels who are hitchhiking down the highway. And of course, this is true in the secular world too. We have the word muse and muses,
Muse, exactly.
which we get music and museums. In other words, the spirit world is there to feed us. Comes to us in dreams, maybe, but also in art and making things new and making things that are beautiful and making things that shatter and tell the truth, even when it's disturbing. And the prophets saw, there's a great book by Walter Brueggemann, an important theologian, called The Prophetic Imagination. The point is that all prophets were artists. In fact, some of our greatest poetry was written by Isaiah or Hosea and so forth in the scriptures, but always the artist, because you're seeking to develop your moral imagination. How can we do better? And that's kicking in that imagination. And we all do this. I mean, I begin my book on creativity saying that, the anthropological definition of a human being is a biped who makes things. We know that we're dealing with one of our ancestors when you find not just a biped, but jewelry
Bod. Yeah.
or cave paintings next to them or something.
Yes.
It's a very working definition of humanity is our creativity, a biped who makes things. And so creativity is not something, for the weekends or something. You have to stop and say, oh, how have I been creative today? And as the creativity is an everyday thing, balancing your checkbook is an act of creativity.
Yeah.
And of course, relating to our family and the clothes you put on and the meal you eat.
Fixture meals, definitely. I mean, that's definitely creating art. If you
There you go. And decorating of a room or growing a garden. I mean, our culture has so narrowed the meaning of art and creativity, whereas it's the very meaning of being human. Many Native American languages do not have the word art in the language because they say everything we do is art. Everything we do is making beauty, sharing with one another, and getting feedback. So there's that loop in creativity. And Gabriel Marcel, the French philosopher, says, you're an artist not only when you put on a play or you sing, but when you're enjoying the play and when you enjoy someone singing or looking at someone's painting, that is art too,
Right.
to receive it as well as to do it. And I just love that because it includes absolutely all of us.
Right.
And you could not have a happy culture, I don't think, without artists of all
Agree.
kinds, from musicians,
Right.
including Bad Bunny, uh, participating and energizing us is part of being human, I think. But in that process, there's also spirit always at work on making all things new. And our job is to, and even technology. I'm thinking, I live in the Bay Area. Just Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, it's awesome. And when you read the story of how this bridge was built, how many people lost their lives building it, etc. I mean, the capacity of human technology to do wonderful things for people for generations and generations driving over it, and yet it looks beautiful. And of course, you have to keep it up, blah, blah, blah. But all that is what culture, what civilization is about. So I just see the gift. Now, Thomas Berry says that all creativity comes from wildness. But there's a wildness to all creativity. I think that's very important. And he says that's what connects us to the whale and to the lion and everything, that there's a wildness to surviving and to finding your way on this earth and to giving back and to being a parent in every sense of the word, educating the next generation. And so to tap into that wildness, there's something divine about that. You see, the wilderness, that the divinity is the ultimate wild presence and the wildness of the universe. I mean, it's not a picnic out there, as we know.
Right.
And even on this planet, the volcanoes and all the rest that made it happen, that make life happen. It's a wild theater we're in here, this thing called the universe. And creativity is something wild about it.
This imagination, intuition, the muse, all these, there's lots of different names for it, but to tap into that is where you feel we are infused with the divine.
That's right. And spirit speaks to us
Absolutely.
in our work, of course. Work itself.
For me, I'll sit if I'm going to write something or showing up, even to think about planning a podcast, I'll say, okay, I'm showing up here. I'm sitting at the table. Now take over. Right. Come through me, whatever it is that I'm supposed to get, whatever's supposed to come from this, right, to bring it through. There's several things that I wanted to highlight there. One is that you mentioned the role of technology, and there's so much conversation right now about AI and technology. And I love what Kevin Kelly, who founded Wired magazine and is a great photographer and so forth, but he was talking about that he's a great hopeful in technology because the only purpose, like what he sees as technology and the only purpose of technology is to help people create, right? That if you were a violinist in 1300, there wouldn't be any music for you to make because there wasn't a violin yet. If you were a YouTuber in 1990, there would be nothing for you to do yet because there wasn't YouTube. And I think that's a very hopeful look on technology, like that technology is what is there to allow all of us to participate more fully in the creative act with whatever technology it is that we need, whether it's a wood chisel or whether it's AI and anything in between. So I like that one very much. And then I think about the process, not being creative to make something that's going to sell or make a business out of, but just for the process of creating something. Right. And one of the things that I've gotten into recently is just cooking great meals, just for my wife. Sometimes it's for friends or kids if they happen to be here. They're not here very much anymore. But to really cook a great meal and pay attention to it, it comes back to the attention. And the other thing that I've noticed about creativity, and I noticed this first you talked about it's being creative to receive art, to pay attention to a play, to pay attention to a painting, but to be able to drop the should out of it. Like that I can't have creativity and a should at the same time. So I noticed this, it hit me I can remember the moment. I was at the Crystal Bridges in Bentonville, Arkansas, this great American, mostly started by the Walton Foundation and family, but this great collection of American art in Bentonville, Arkansas. And it was the first time when I was walking through there, it was the first time I allowed myself, and I was already, 48 or 50 years old. So I'm a pretty slow guy, but it was the first time I allowed myself to just sense the art. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Does it move me? Does it not move me? Without any shoulds, without any reasons, without, if I like it, I have to have a reason why I like it, or I have to have a reason why I don't like it, or I should like this type of art, or I should like that type of art. Oh, I'm a nature guy, so I should like nature paintings, but I shouldn't like abstract. Whatever the case is, it was the first time where I allowed myself. And now it makes sense to me what you said about the creative process of just receiving the art without having any second guessing or shoulds. And the same thing applies on the creating side of it as well. If I have shoulds while I'm trying to be in the creative process, forget about it. I need to just create and not worry about the editing or whether it works or doesn't work while I'm in a creative process. And that can be very simple in many ways. And it's important for all of us to be learning, to be creating, to be meditating or centering, being in awe and wonder. I think all of those things are, if I want to be healthy and show up in the best way I can for myself and others in my life, I need to be doing all of those things on a regular basis. And that
Well, I like that point about eliminating the should. Meister Eckhart has this teaching about living without a why, and loving without a why, and working without a why. And he says until you can learn to live without a why, love without a why, and work without a why, you don't know how to live or why. So again, you're taking that, you're stepping out of just the moralizing and the judgment dimension of life to another level. And it's like Rumi saying, beyond the world of good and evil, there is a field, I will meet you there. So good and evil has its place, but it's not the whole ball game. There's a field where that stuff is suspended. And I hear you talking about that, and that's so important that not everything has to be nailed down for a particular purpose. That beauty can be at times without a lie, and all kinds of things can be. And that's when you're in a realm of the spiritual, more than just the realm of accomplishment or judgment,
Right.
or even morality.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Matthew, if for somebody that's in the middle of the suffering right now, or in the middle of a big transition, or is really going through the grieving process, what's one, and maybe we already covered it, and it's fine to reiterate it here, but what's one thing that you would recommend to them that they can do right now, that could hit pause on this podcast and do right now?
Well, one you can do, here's a shaman practice that I received, and it really works. I shared it with many. Get a hand drum and beat it daily for 15 minutes. Whatever sounds want to come out of your third chakra, out of your gut, let them out. Don't edit them.
At the same time when you're drumming.
While you're drumming, absolutely. And the genius behind this is this. They say you're riding the horse, that the hide of the drum, into the land of grief. And when I first heard this and I was going through a grieving process, I'd never heard there was a land of grief, much less if there's a way in and out that you could ride it. But I practiced it, and it absolutely works. I tell people it'll cut your grief time in half. And in one of my meditations doing this one day, I ended up in a group of Native American women who were grieving. And I said to them, I said, you have more to grieve about than I do. And one of them spoke up and said, if your heart is broken, stay. You only have one heart. And that taught me two things. One, grief is not a competition. Mirror around the wall, who's most of all. And number two, it's utterly universal. It's part of being human. So that practice is super practical, and I swear it works. So many people have responded by telling me it works, and I had my own experience with it. And it's an ancient practice. And again, you're riding the horse into the land of grief. And the anger, you see, by beating the drum as hard as you want, you're not hurting anybody. Your anger has a place to go without hurting anybody. And that's part of the genius of it. So that's a practice that I'm happy to share.
I'm going to try that. I've got a nice income right there.
There you go. We'll be ready to go. There you go. Oh, absolutely believe in it. And the thing is, if we can't deal with the grief, then there's a boulder in our heart. There's a rock in our hearts. When you can deal with it like that, well, then creativity comes back, you see.
Right.
Then comes the creativity. Then comes the relationships and the joy and the possibilities and even the forgiveness in our lives. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to move that rock of grief that sits there, often unattended, especially with men, because we're not encouraged to look that hard at ourselves. We're encouraged to, that's why I say there's a hidden spirituality in that the visible part of manliness in our culture does not admit that there is grief or that we are grieving.
Right. Right. No, I think that's interesting, that the rock of grief, it brings back this picture of Michael Singer talks about the, life and creative energy and God or being, whatever you want to call it, is flowing like a stream. But we have all these rocks in the stream that are creating this turbulence and backing it up and stopping it. And our job, before we try to create and make, we should remove the rocks from the stream.
Resurrection. I compare it to the rock in Jesus' tomb got rolled back.
Yeah.
Then there's a new life, a new version.
Exactly. Oh, that's wonderful. Final question, Matthew. If people, which they will, want to connect with you after this amazing conversation, where's the best place to reach out to you? Is there a website or an email or social media that's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, I recommend just my website. It's very simple, www.matthewfox.org. MatthewFox.org. And then there's the Daily Meditations with MatthewFox.org. So I give these away for free every day. And either of those are places you can connect with me. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Matthew, what an honor and what a joy to be present today. And
I appreciate our conversation and the journey that you're on. Will make it very real.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your wisdom and your vulnerability and sharing what you've learned and what you see with me and with our audience today. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Life in Transition podcast. I really appreciate your support. The best way you can support is to leave a review. Let me know how it's going. Leave a rating, leave a review, and share with somebody that you know can really benefit. They're going to love it, and you're going to make a new friend. Thank you. You know what makes this podcast possible? Our incredible sponsor, Verity Wealth Partners, a Northwestern Mutual private client group. At Verity Wealth Partners, your life plan is the cornerstone of your financial strategy. With many years of combined experience, Verity empowers purpose-driven business owners and leaders to envision their best life, providing clarity and perspective to unlock what is possible. Verity's comprehensive integrated advice helps their clients transform success into significance, creating a lasting impact. Discover how Verity's comprehensive financial services, including proactive rebalancing, tax-efficient strategies, and strategic distribution, can help you get the most life out of your wealth and not the other way around. So if you're ready to transition with purpose and turn your success into a legacy that makes a difference, visit veritywealthpartners.com/lifeintransition to take the first step in finding out more. Look for the link in the show notes. Experience a future where your vision shapes your wealth strategy. Live your Verity.